Hey, everybody. This is Dr. Dave Nelson, director of the Scotland Study Abroad program. I also teach history in the program. And I want to go ahead and get this video out. This is about how to buy airline tickets to Edinburgh for the program. And I'm recording this maybe a little bit later. I usually try to do this in early March. It's March 19th today, Wednesday. Um, and I know at least five of you out of 20 have already bought your tickets. But I still wanted to go ahead and give a little info out. A few of you, I think, watched last year's video, exactly the same thing, just for last year for 2024. If you've watched that, you may not need to watch this one again. It's the same info, just I just updated it with obviously this year's dates. But I do, before you click off, say I've seen this already. I do need to talk about dates just a little bit. Um, so we always begin the program on the Sunday. So this year that'd be May 25th, and that is when everybody needs to be in Edinburgh and 5 o'clock in the lobby of the hostel. And I can give more information about that another time, but doesn't mean you can't show up a little bit early. Just know that if you show up before that Sunday, you do need to get your own housing. So some people are coming in a couple of days early. Just know you got to get your own hotel room. Um, where we're staying only opens up for us on May 25th, that Sunday. As far as leaving, normally we ended on that second Friday, which this year is June 6th. And if you've seen any of my promos or if you've talked to me directly, I know I did some Teams meetings about a month ago with some of you. I always said Friday, June 6th, because that's when we always ended it. I've only fairly realized that actually we have to place until 7th of June. And if you look at what's on USG Goes Global, or if you've talked to Cassie, you may have seen Saturday, June 6th as the end date. That's why I have 6th, 7th here. Um, Basically what Cassie did is she was able to, and I didn't know this, she was able to kind of work out a deal where we actually get an extra night. Students always complain that they always want more free time because we do have a lot of stuff we're doing, field trips and lectures and such. And we try to give you some free time, but students always say, "Oh, I wish we had one more day." She actually was able to work it out. It's the same price we've in the past. It's just we actually have an extra night. And I did not realize that until just fairly recently. So we're not going to extend like the class stuff any longer. We're still going to end when we normally end. It's just you actually have another night in Edinburgh. That is just kind of your own thing. In other words, we have one more night at the hostel. So you can still leave on June 6th if you're ready to come on home, because the program will be over at that point. I mean, I'll be around, Dr. Muth will be around, but the program will be over at that point. Or you can stay till that Saturday and then check out. Now you can stay longer in the UK, just you're on your own at that point. I know a couple of students are going down to London and hanging out, but that's all on your own. But as far as what you've paid for the program, again, it turns out our housing does go until Saturday, the 7th of June. So again, if you want to stay to that Saturday, uh, it's fine because, like I said, it's no extra cost. We actually got an extra day. So that's why there's been maybe a little confusion where, again, you may have seen June 6th at the end of the program, and then elsewhere you've seen June 7th. So the program officially, the class stuff again ends on June 6th, but we actually got to place until the 7th of June. So it's up to you whether you want to leave on the 6th or 7th. So we got a little open ended there. Okay, so I do want to talk a little bit about how to actually buy tickets and some of the things to think about. Just keep in mind, this is, I'm not a travel expert. I've done this a lot, but I don't do the same thing everybody else does. This is just kind of my advice, and I'll explain why I'm giving the advice I'm giving. Um, Okay. So another thing, and again, I've sent some of this out directly to a few of you, but I do have a lot of videos about, again, what to pack and things to think about. When we meet in orientation in May, I think we meet 2 weeks before we actually leave. I think it's like the 12th or 13th. Don't quote me. Um, I'll go over a lot of this again. Some of this you need to be thinking about already. So I do have a channel. And you can click on the playlist for Scotland and you'll see all the videos. But I'll try to start sending some of these out. Some of these I won't update. I mean, they're still valid. A couple of these I might create new versions of. But again, how to get around, things to think about on the weekend. If you've never flown before, just things to be thinking about, all that stuff. But today, again, is just looking at airline. One other thing, and again, I do have a whole video about this, as far as just real quick, because this is kind of a newer thing to the program or to Edinburgh. So again, you're going to want to fly. probably out of Atlanta, but there are some other options. But you're flying, ultimately, you're flying into Edinburgh. I have had students do Glasgow before. Glasgow is about 40 miles away, but then you have to get from Glasgow to Edinburgh. Now, if it's me, I've done it enough times. I might be, because sometimes Glasgow is cheaper, but you got to. It can be a hassle with all your luggage to get off the plane, out of the airport, get from the airport to say a bus or the train, and all the way to you want to fly to Edinburgh. And of course, the airport's about 30 minutes out of town, just like most airports are. So getting from the airport to the hostel is not hard at all. In the past, I've always recommended doing taxis or Ubers. When we all used to fly on the same ticket, which we haven't done that in a few years, I used to rent a coach sometimes to take us here. But actually, a couple of years ago, they opened up something brand new, and that are these trams that run from the airport. And in fact, one of the stops is right in front of the hostel. It is the easiest thing to do, and it's also the cheapest option. Well, there is a bus that's cheaper, but the bus stops along quite a ways from the hostel, so you still have to walk from there to the hostel. This is the best option. It has been a game changer for students coming in, and it has just made it so easy. And so, again, that's usually a question that students have when they're buying tickets. How do I get from the airport to the hostel? So when you arrive in Edinburgh, and like I said, I have a whole video talking about what to expect when you fly. But when you come out of the airport, you got your luggage, you're in country, and you walk out of the airport. This is what you will see, and you just walk under this awning. They have this little ticket booth, and again, it's just a kiosk. You use your credit card. I think you can even use cash if you have British pounds already. And you look at the menu and you click. You're going to do a return ticket. We call that round trip. Because you're gonna have to get back to the airport at the end. So go ahead and get that return ticket, and and you buy that, and then you say, where you want to go. It's actually going to be the McDonald Road stop. And again, this is kind of a map from the airport. McDonald Road is about where it says Edinburgh on the map. And again, I know it doesn't mean much to you, but you see it says Leith Walk. That's the road that we're on. And if you look at kind of the very bottom of the image and right in the middle, it says Edinburgh Central Youth Hostel. And again, the tram stop's literally right there. So you go right from the airport, right when you walk, right out of the airport, you get on a tram. They're super easy. They run about every 10 minutes. And then you literally get off right there at. And this is literally the building. The hostel is a little bit off screen to the left, but that is the building. And it literally stops right there. It's super, super easy to get to. And in fact, in this image, you can, I'm pointing that you can't see, but on the left side of that building, that is the hostel. So it is that easy. And then when you go back, you literally walk out of the hostel with your luggage, jump on the train. You already got your ticket, and it will take you directly to the airport. The tram itself runs about 40 minutes, sometimes on a busy day, a little bit longer because it's a tram, but it does run in the roads. So sort of traffic can actually stop it a little bit. But so always give yourself a good 45 minutes to an hour to get to the airport. But anyway, we can talk about that when we're in country too. I give you that advice. So when you're thinking about buying plane tickets, and I know for some of you this is your first time buying plane tickets, others of you may be experienced travelers. These are just some considerations to think about. These are my considerations. Some of you may not agree with me on this, but this is kind of my advice. So as I go through this, I will show you using Expedia sort of the thought process as I'm showing you some of the tickets out there. So once, and I have to phrase if possible, because sometimes because of money or there's no other options, you may not be able to do this. Try to do one airline, whether it's Delta or JetBlue or Aer Lingus, which is the Ireland flight, or the British Airways, whatever. Especially on the journey, because you're flying from the US to Edinburgh, and then you're going to be flying back. So there's technically two journeys. It's great if it's all can be one airline. Sometimes it's a little cheaper that way. But also, if there's any issues, they can handle it. So most of you are not going to be able to get a direct flight. What that means is, literally flying, say, from Atlanta to Edinburgh. You don't have to stop anywhere else. Those are expensive, and they also sell out really quickly. So most of you probably will have to do at least one stop. In other words, you'll fly from maybe Atlanta to Boston, and then in Boston you'll get on another flight to Edinburgh. That's going to be pretty normal. You really want that to be the same airline. So if it isn't, so what happens is, let's say you're flying from Atlanta to Boston, and let's say you're flying Delta, and let's say the plane leaves late. There's an issue and it leaves an hour late. Now you're in Boston, but the flight to Edinburgh has already left. If it's a Delta flight for both of them, Delta will cover the cost and they'll get you on another flight. But if it's another airline, that other airline doesn't care. They're not responsible for that first flight. So, if you're late, they're like, sorry, you missed the flight. There's nothing you can do about that. You have to buy another ticket, right? So that's why, if possible, try to keep it the same airline. And again, that same logic is why you really want the whole thing to be one airline, if possible. But at least the flights to get to the place, you really want them to be the same airline, uh, because again, those things do happen. And I've been there when we've had to buy another ticket. Like when I fly with my family, and we've done two airlines, and it does happen sometimes. So again, that's one advice. Um, if you can get nonstop for a good price, that's obviously the best option. I've only gotten that a couple of times over the years, but try to keep it to one stop. Some of these prices you're going to go, oh my gosh, that's so cheap. But again, it's always the details, and you might notice it's two stops or even three stops. So a two stop would be like you fly from Atlanta to Boston, and then Boston to London, and then London to Edinburgh. The reason, if possible, that you don't want to do that is because it's kind of like rolling the dice, right? Each one of those flights could be late or have an issue. And so that's three ways that you could be late and miss your flight, as opposed to one way or two ways. I've even seen four. I'd be like crazy. So again, really pay attention to how many stops is it. Like I said, you may need to get that cheap flight, or it might be your only option, and but just keep that in mind. That's something sometimes people don't think about until they get their ticket and go, wait a minute, I'm flying to Chicago, then I'm flying to Cincinnati, and then I'm flying to Edinburgh. Um, and related to that is layover time. And again, if you've never flown before, that may not be a word you're familiar with, but that just means, like, when, let's say, Atlanta to Boston, whatever time you're in Boston before your next flight, that's called your layover. And you really do want to be careful with that. First off, sometimes if it's really cheap, you'll notice the layover might be 16 hours. And again, I've done those, but phone goes off when I'm recording a video. Um, sorry, never had that before. Um, I like to read, so I have just sat there and read first, but 6 hours is a long time. I've even sometimes it's even a whole day. So be careful of that. But to me, the bigger issue is making sure it's not too quick. Because remember, when you look at times, it is it's wheels off the ground and wheels back on the ground. It does not take into account going through security, getting on the plane, getting off, which takes forever, getting off the plane, going to another part of the airport, wherever your flight might be, sometimes going through security again, loading up. So sometimes you think, oh, I got 30 minutes. I can do that. Uh, Probably not. So really, really pay attention to that time. Personally, I like a 2 hour layover. My wife thinks I'm crazy, but that 2 hours usually ends up being really quick. Because again, by the time you get off the plane, you get to your next, sometimes it's less than an hour left. So I like a good 2 hour layover, 90 minutes maybe, but definitely do not do less than an hour. Try not to do less than an hour, because it's just a rest. All it takes is just a tiny bit being late to mess up everything. So be careful with that. Um, and again, more time is better, but you also don't want it to be 20 hours, or having to spend the night or something. So do pay attention to that layover time. That's the devil's in the details. Check bag price. Sometimes they include that. So check bag means, so you can carry what they call carry on, which would be like your backpack. And boy, take advantage of stuff in your backpack. And then you have your suitcase, and your suitcase, you check it. That means they take it from you, and then they load it up in the bottom of the plane, and then you don't get that bag back until you get to where you're going. That's your checked bag. And sometimes they include the checked bag one as part of the ticket price. Other airlines, they charge you extra for that. In fact, they're just in the news, Southwest Airlines, which does not go to Edinburgh. They've always been known for having free check bags. They just changed their policy. Now they're charging for check bags. So always check for that, that pun, but always check for that because sometimes, in fact, I'll show you an example in a moment where they didn't include that price. So you think you're getting one deal, but anyway, so just kind of make sure what's included. I always say go economy. I mean, the plane. This is where people do disagree with me sometimes. You're all getting there, no matter what, no matter how much you pay for that ticket, first class, business class, you're getting there at the same time. You're just traveling. Flying stinks for everybody. There's no getting around it. It's long, it's crowded, it takes forever. You're exhausted. You don't get any sleep on the plane. It is what it is. It is not worth upgrading. In my opinion, it's not worth upgrading because, as you'll see, it can be thousands of dollars. Just go economy. Try to go as cheap as you can because you're getting there at the same time. It's not about the flight; it's about where you're going. And again, be careful all the bells and whistles. They'll try just like when you buy a car, they'll try to throw a lot of stuff on there. Be careful with that. Try to keep it as cheap as you can. So let's actually go through buying a ticket. Expedia is one I normally use, but I'll give you some other options. They're all about the same nowadays. I find they're the ones that's kind of the easiest. And I have actually had some issues in the past with an airline. 2022, the year of the end of COVID, and flying was just getting back started. I had some crazy issues that year, and I'm not gonna lie, Expedia helped me out on that. They didn't have to, they actually did. So again, I'm not advertising for them, but I did find them a pretty good company to use. So, and they're the easiest. So I'm going to use Expedia, then I'm going to show you some other options. So again, this is just the front page, what it looks like. Um, Most of you will probably come out of Atlanta. That does have the most options. Of course, Delta is based in Atlanta. So ATL, in other words, for Atlanta. We're winding up in Edinburgh or EDI. That's the airport designation there. And there's no other airports. There's only one Edinburgh. London has several airports. You got to be careful with London, but Edinburgh's easy. And again, it's always going to be the next day for going to Europe, just the way the time and stuff works. So you'll actually be clicking if you're arriving on the 25th. Now, some of you are going to arrive earlier, but just always keep in mind, if you got a hotel booked for Friday the 23rd, make sure you leave on the 22nd. Again, it's going to be an overnighter. But anyway, so for most of you, Saturday, May 24th is when you're going to actually be on the plane. I have had students not think about it and they buy a ticket for the 25th of May, thinking they're in the same day, and then they don't arrive till that Monday. So 24th of May. I'm booking it right now for the 6th of June, which was the date I've always said. Uh, but I'm also going to show you the times, the prices for 7th of Saturday, which is probably when most of you will actually buy your ticket for, because why wouldn't you, right? Except for maybe the price. So that's your dates. This is your options. Again, some of your options is just there's a bunch of hits. You can see on the side, there's a whole bunch of hits here. These are just the top two options. So again, 1,400, to be honest with you, that was pretty common last year. They're a little bit better this year. So you got that's your Delta, and then what is that? American Airlines has a 799. That looks really great, but notice it is two stops, and that top one is nonstop. So that might be valuable to you, but you're paying more for that. So again, these are a few more of the options kind of scrolling down. Again, there's several at that 799 price. They're all two stops. And again, you can see how long these flights are. So again, there's some long layovers on some of these. And then you got kind of the one I would recommend with these options, that 1192. Again, that's still about $300 cheaper than we were paying last year. And it's only one stop. So if you click on that of those, that in fact, this is really the flight I would probably recommend. It's not too long. It's only one stop. And again, you start looking at the details. Again, one of those bells and whistles. They say you get to pick your seat. Now, again, there are some people that really, really, really want to pick their seat. They're claustrophobic or they have bathroom issues. I mean, I do like an aisle seat myself. I don't like being crowded in. I can get up easy, but uh, I'll take what I don't really care. Some people do, but you're paying for that. You're paying a couple of $100 extra, if you notice, to get that seat choice. Is that really important to you? To me, that's a bell and whistle. Carry-on bag's always included. So that's again, they're acting like that's a big thing. That's normal. But notice they do make you pay for the check bag, $70. So that's going to be a little bit added. So keep in mind that so you're going to have a check bag that's going to be $70 more. You do have a cancellation fee. If you go for the higher option, you don't have it. But are you going to cancel? Right. So anyway, so again, always pay attention to the details. The main thing here is just you're going to have to pay a little more for that check bag. That's going to be, they should include it in the price, but they don't. Some people are able to fly without a check bag. I mean, I've even had students that have just been able to just using yoga pants and t-shirts, and they just roll it up and they're able to do it all as a carry-on. I've never had that art if I'm doing a longer trip. So, but some people have been able to do it. And then again, you can start getting more seat choice, carry-on bag included, check bag included, all allow changes, but you're paying more for that. And then if you really want to go fancy, 4,500, that's for first class and all that. But again, that 1192 plus the $70, that's a pretty good deal. That would be the one. If I was buying the ticket, that would be the one I would buy with these options. I mean, I would look a little bit more, but that would be the one I would go with. Again, so looking, then you have to. So that's your flight going over. Oh, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of going in a little hurry here. Again, also looking at the times of when you actually arrive. Notice you're also arriving pretty late with those cheap flights. You're not actually, I mean, again, you're really talking about a 24-hour period here. I mean, it's not exactly 17 hours, but you're leaving at 8 o'clock here. You're not arriving until 7 o'clock the next day. Again, you're missing dinner if you're doing those flights. So again, 5 o'clock is when we're meeting. We're gonna have dinner between six and starting between 6 and 7. So you wouldn't even be in Edinburgh and ready to go before we're already done with dinner and going to bed. So again, be paying a little attention to the times. Again, that 1192 arrives nice and early. You actually, you can store your luggage at the hostel, go get some lunch, walk around a little bit, and meet at 5. Again, you got plenty of time to do stuff. Again, that's a all around that is a good option. And then you got to pick your return flight. And again, most of the time it's going to be it is the same price. But again, every so often, sort of the return flight, if there's a little special thing, they might add a little bit. Again, if you want a non-stop return flight, you're going to be paying, $2,000 extra to get that. But most of them are going to be the same. It's included, right? So again, these coming back's less of an issue because you don't have a timeline of when you have to be back. Um, and again, these will all be on the same day. Flying back is always that way. So again, 11:30 a.m. arriving at 7:30 in Atlanta, or uh, noon, but you also not arriving until 11:30. Both of those are decent options. I would take the top option, obviously, but they're both decent options. They both only have one stop. No big deal. Just remember that when you come back, you will have to go through passport and all that. You're coming back into the country. So again, always pay a little bit of attention to that layover. One is 3 hours. The other one is a little over 6 hours. Again, top option is your best option here because of those details. And then when you actually say, okay, I'm buying these are what I'm buying. Again, just looking at what you're getting with all that. We've already kind of gone over that. Um, and then you're ready to check out. And again, if you were doing that flight, the flight over and that flight back, and again, total plus the $70 for check bag is 1191. I mean, that's actually a pretty good price. I mean, maybe I know some of you are experiencing some sticker shock, but these are actually that's a pretty good price. I always say about 1,200 is cheap, and 14 to 1,500 is on the top end. Anything above that to me is too expensive still. But that range, 12 to 1,500, is kind of the range for these tickets. And that's been the case for a decade now. That's pretty much been standard. Last year, it was definitely closer to that 1,500 range. I think, in fact, I paid 1,600 last year, most I've ever paid. Uh, and there were none at that 1,100 range. Oh, here you go. There's this. I give you an example of what when I did this last year. The cheap option was 1,500, but that was the cheapest option last year that I could find, and I ended up paying more than that because I did slightly different dates. So I'm just again, we as much as as high as they were actually more expensive last year than they are. Last year was the most we've ever seen students pay, and I had a couple that paid 2,000 for their tickets, but I think they didn't. I don't know how they paid that much, but and just real quick, this is actually from last year, but just to show you. So what you do need, you don't have to have your passport when you're buying the ticket, but you do have to enter your name exactly as it is on your passport. I mean, no deviations. Like I'm David, I can't put Dave. If it's David on my passport, I have to use David. No nicknames. If my middle name, which it usually will be, is in there, you can't skip your middle name. So because that will be the issue. And I know my wife has a hyphenated name. Sometimes that causes problems. I know some people have really long names, and the tickets will shorten the name, or again, names that aren't as common, names that maybe are in Spanish, or sometimes or Indian names. Sometimes those get trouble. So just be very careful. Make sure it's exactly as it is on the passport. And then you do put your gender and your birth, and not to get into it, but your gender does need to match what's on your passport. Even if you identify differently, it does have to match your passport. I know that's a big issue right now, but it's just the way it is. And make sure you do put your birth date in there. But you don't have to have your passport in hand when you're doing this. Like if you're still waiting on your passport, you can still buy your ticket. Just make sure it matches. Anyway, so that is using um Expedia for Edinburgh from Atlanta, but I did the 6th of June. Again, very likely most of you are going to do the 7th of June. It does look like those prices are a little bit more, not hugely more. I mean, it looks like it's about $30 more for the cheap flight here. So again, just you know, if money is a big issue, it might be worth flying back on the 6th rather than the 7th. I mean, again, you're not losing any money because we got an extra night. But to me, it's worth it. I mean, an extra $40, but you get an extra day in Edinburgh. Take it. Okay. Some options to be thinking about. Again, Atlanta's going to be the most obvious for most of you because you're Georgia. I live in Florida. I'm in Quincy, Florida right now, just below Georgia. Um, but Orlando does have cheap flights sometimes. And in fact, I know some students from Florida that are going this year. I think they actually are doing Orlando. So again, that's about the same distance for me as to go to Atlanta, being in North Florida. For some of you, if you're closer to Atlanta, this would be silly because that's a long way to drive. But it might be an option for some of you. So always check Orlando. Um, Again, think about other big cities that might be in driving distance of you. So again, the Orlando here didn't look like they were that much greater. Yeah. Actually, there's one that's exactly the same price as the Atlanta one. So again, that may not really be worth the effort because it is basically the same price. If it's We're going to be thinking about is Jacksonville, Florida. Again, for a lot of you, that actually might be because it's just below the state line. For some of you, it might be closer. I know we have at least one student coming out of Brunswick. If you're like Savannah, Brunswick, Valdosta, it actually might be an easier drive to Jacksonville. And it's a nice, easy airport. It's pretty small rather than driving all the way to Atlanta. And I from Jacksonville often beats the price of Atlanta. Um, Again, you got a shorter flight, one stop for 1,097. That's actually a better deal than the Atlanta flight was. It's shorter and cheaper, and it's only one stop. And there's another one that's one stop, also shorter, that's also still cheaper. So again, think about Jacksonville as when you're searching for flights, especially if you're closer to Jacksonville, that might be an option that you're not thinking of. You don't have to do Atlanta. But again, keep in mind drive time, gas, you know, is somebody driving you or are you going to have to park your car? So that's another option to be thinking about. But anyway, especially Jacksonville is one I definitely recommend you at least look at to see if your flight. So that's the main bulk of it. But real quick, there are other companies. Kayak is one that's pretty common. I know my wife has bought tickets through there before. Again, it's exactly the same thing. Um, I found this year, it looked like the prices weren't really that much better on Kayak. I think Expedia still had the best prices, but but I think this one you can filter a little bit more. You can play with it a little bit more. These are just some of the quick hits I got. Um, Again, that they do like the one that looked pretty good. When you click on it, it's a 10-hour layover though. That is a long layover. So kind of keep that in mind. And you're also not arriving until almost midnight on the 25th. So again, be thinking about those kinds of things. In other words, don't just look at that price. Really think about, okay. But like I said, if money's really, I know there's at least one student that's been emailing me and said, money's hard for me this year. You might be doing a flight with two stops and coming in really late, and so again, do what you have to do, but try your best to at least think about the consideration. Another company, there's plenty. Another one's Hopper. that some people recommended. Actually, they had some pretty good prices on Hopper, I found. And again, even when you look at the details, they still kind of hold up. They're coming in a little bit late's the main issue, but other than that, they weren't too bad. One last thing to think about, this year it didn't seem to be a good option, but sometimes just going directly to the airline. And some of you might have deals like flat, frequent flyer miles or something with Delta. So, especially because you're Georgian. So, sometimes going right to the airline can be good. This year it did. When I looked at, I thought the prices were pretty high. It didn't seem to really give you any advantage to do that. But again, think about the airlines that again, JetBlue, Aer Lingus, Delta, American Airlines, British Airways. It may just be worth doing a quick search on their websites just to see if their prices are any better. So again, they know most people are buying through Expedia and companies like that, but still, sometimes it is worth trying. All right, that's it for, hopefully that was helpful. Like I said, I know some of you have already bought your tickets, but one last thing I'll mention if you're still listening, if you haven't turned it off yet. Um, the two things. One is, I don't know if I said this already, you do want to go ahead and get those tickets. You don't have to do it today, but you want to get them sooner than later. I know somebody emailed me and said that they were told that maybe waiting later, the prices go down. Prices go up and down all the time. There's no rhyme or reason a lot of times. But to be honest with you, if you've noticed, they even said three left. That's not always true. But still, there's only so many flights to Edinburgh, and they get the less seats are left, the more they charge. It's supply and demand. And most of these flights will fill up. So there's no real most of the time there's not an incentive for them to lower their prices. They're just going to go up. So you don't have to do it right this second, but you do want to get it sooner than later. So a trick that I've learned from travel agents in the past, although I think a lot of people know this trick now, again, there's not really a rhyme or reason, but sometimes on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and I am doing this on a Wednesday, so you might, if you're doing this on a Friday, you might get slightly different prices than what I showed you. Sometimes airlines do run their deals on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. That used to be like the big secret trick that travel agents knew. Nobody uses travel agents anymore. Uh, but I have found that sometimes they are even just minutely cheaper. Sometimes it does help. But I wouldn't let that, like, if you're ready to buy a ticket and it's Friday, go ahead and just buy the ticket. Don't wait till the next Tuesday because the flight may fill up by then. Anyway, I don't want to rush you, but it is now time to buy the ticket. I mean, you got 2 months. It's up to you when you buy it. But I would do it in the next couple of weeks, to be totally honest. I think it is. In fact, I got to buy my ticket, which I haven't bought yet. Okay, thanks, guys. Hopefully, again, this was helpful. And if you have any direct questions, please don't be afraid to email me.